the Peruvian highlands. Lake Titicaca and the city of Puno lie 3,800 meters above sea level. From here, the Pan-American Highway leads to Cusco, the legendary one-time capital of the Inca Empire. The name Cusco is Quechua and means navel of the world. According to legend, this was where the first people lived. The son of the sun god came from Lake Titicaca and founded the city together with his sister. Cusco is one of the most beautiful cities in South America and a major tourist magnet. It's also a cultural melting pot. Different waves of settlers have left their own marks on it. The architecture of the houses reflects Andean civilizations and the Incas, as well as the Spanish colonial era.
The Incas had what is known as rusticated stone, a 15-degree inclination to protect against earthquakes, the trapezoid ground plan, and square plates. It's the only style typical of the Incas that can be found in the entire pre-Columbian period.
The Temple of the Sun, today the Santo Domingo Convent, was the most important Inca temple. The Incas called it the Coricancha. It was their most sacred site for religious and ritual practices. Many of the construction methods have changed little over the centuries. The loam between these stones, for example, is compacted in the traditional manner. The salt fields of Maras lie 60 kilometers to the northwest. The white gold was extracted and dried in the Inca era. Before tectonic plate movements gave rise to the Andes, this was a seabed, and the ground still has a very high saline content.
The Incas also used to extract salt here. They worked down there, close to the river. Then our ancestors built this well. We only do this for 6 months, from May to October. We stop working when it rains because the water would completely dissolve the salt.
Today's salt gatherers work in much the same way as their Inca forefathers did. The technique has only been slightly improved over the last 500 years. The subtropics and the fringes of the rainforest begin 75 kilometers from Cusco. Tourists are shuttled to Machu Picchu on the Inca Railway. Tucked in among the mountain peaks, all of which were revered as gods by the Incas, and surrounded by tropical evergreen plant life, is the sacred site of the Incas. It's estimated that 1,200 people once lived here, an elite, the wealthier ones above and the workers below, until the year 1535, when the Spanish occupied Cusco. The residents of Machu Picchu left the city, locked the gates, and the sacred mountain was forgotten. Today, Machu Picchu is one of the world's most popular tourist attractions. The mystery and power that emanate from this place are almost tangible. The presidential palace in Lima on the Plaza de Armas, or Armament Square. Many central squares in South America share this name. The striking colonial-era balconies are typical of Lima. Peru's capital is also the country's largest city, with a population of well over 7 million. Brightly coloured houses line the roads out to the suburbs. City authorities distributed paint to homeowners in an effort to spruce up residential areas a bit. The neighbourhood 20 de Octubre is in the district of Villa de Salvador. There are no street names here anymore. Ask for directions and people will tell you a yi, a ya and a yisito, here, there and right around here. Out here in what looks like no man's land, we visit a social project which aims to get kids off the streets and playing football. Coach Emerson Calderon Jimenez gives the team a pep talk.
So, what are the values? Solidarity, respect, harmony. Very good. Street soccer's not a war after all. What is street soccer? A sport, a game, a social event. And this is a way for us to try to learn some basic values.
Children learn about values through sport, values that they can then apply elsewhere in life.
There are lots of problems with drugs and gangs here. We're trying to get the children to come to us so we can help them. And for their part, they show us how they live and how we can work together.
Street soccer rules are different from those of regular football. The winner is not the one who shoots the most goals, but the one who follows those rules. The children agree on the rules in advance and decide among themselves which team deserves to win after a game. Instead of a referee, there's a mediator, like Steve Simon Crespin, who started out as a player here himself.
If you want to serve in this function in the street soccer league, you have to have a good performance record as a sportsman. If you don't start off respecting these rules as a sportsman, you can't work as a mediator and you can't lead a group of youngsters. Friends helped to prepare me for it. We young people are doing this together. We're doing something for our neighborhood here.
It doesn't matter how well a youngster can play. Everyone who follows the rules is welcome to join in.
Through soccer, they learn that they have to respect each other, that sticking to the rules depends only on them. And later, when they get used to that idea, they can apply these same rules in society at large.
It's the first time that anyone has taken any interest at all in many of these children. Lima is a city of stark contrasts. Miraflores, one of the capital's most prosperous neighborhoods, stands right on Waikiki Beach. The city's climate is notorious for its damp, cold mists. People live right on the sand cliffs over the beach. Peruvian cuisine is world famous, and some say the best on the entire continent. Husband and wife Astrid and Gastón run several restaurants in Lima. They embody a particular lifestyle and an individual approach to food. The cuisine is sophisticated and very Peruvian, but with a modern twist.
It's sort of cuisine d'auteur, a bit modern. We do still serve familiar dishes too, but we add a bit more creativity, more technical work. The desserts have very modern elements. We play around with those. We experiment and play with no limits.
Each restaurant has its own concept, its own personality. The Tanta, for instance, functions as a bistro. The food is light and Mediterranean with traditional Peruvian elements.
Die peruanische Küche ist eine sehr vielseitige, sehr reiche Küche.
Peruvian cuisine is very rich and very diverse, and that's due to the many different influences. We have the Spanish influence, Japanese, Chinese and African influences. They're all equally strong. None of them really lets the other get the upper hand, and each exerts an influence on the others.
Astrid Gutcher is half German and half French. She and her Peruvian husband are among Peru's most successful chefs. The two have put out several prize-winning cookbooks. Each of them has their own individual focus in the kitchen. Astrid is in charge of desserts.
If you try to do the same thing as your husband, it never works out. You shouldn't even bother trying. I'd already packed my suitcases. I was off. Then we agreed to divide up the work, so I did all the desserts in the different restaurants. Nowadays, I'd have to say I'd rather do the desserts than all the cooking.
Ahead of us is the Amazon. Iquitos is surrounded by rainforest and can only be reached by air or boat. There's no road link. Pueblo Libre lies right on the water and is home to some of Peru's poorest people. Many of them are indigenous. During the rubber boom in the 1800s, Iquitos prospered, but local people saw very little of the profits. The situation is much the same today, with outside interests making repeated grabs for the jungle's natural riches. The market in Belém shows the diversity of the rainforest and some of its peculiarities. "400,000 people live in Iquitos. The city's isolation has led it to develop its own mobility culture, with motocarros replacing the car. Iquitos' Plaza de Armas is bounded by the Catholic Church and the Casa de Hierro, or Iron House, designed by the French architect Gustave Eiffel. Almost everyone in Iquitos is descended from the Indios, but the forest peoples still suffer discrimination. The Indios are fighting for their rights. The environmental organization Red Ambiental Loretana supports students from the Amazon basin. "30 students from different tribes have built huts here, and they can live in them free of charge."
The regional government are giving them $1 a day per person, but that only really buys them enough food for one meal. But little by little, we want to get them books, we want to make it easier for them to study. 7 last year went back to their families because they had no way of staying at the university. So if the indigenous movement peoples are going to have a future, they've got to prepare their people as professionals, and they've got to participate in civil society. So that means we've got to help them prepare themselves, and that's really what we're trying to do here.
The university also offers courses in subjects such as law and environmental protection, so these students will be better equipped for the future. Rubén Medina Robledo is studying economics.
They took our language and our culture away from us, and they had us believe that we have to civilize ourselves so that they can come and take away all our natural resources. 100 years ago, we were being killed. We're not being slain today, but instead, the oil companies and forestry concerns are coming and poisoning us, our forests, rivers, and our blood. Our Indian brothers have lead and cadmium in their blood, and we're slowly dying. Things haven't changed.
The Ataya River flows through Iquitos. Lumber from illegal logging is shipped quite openly on it. 95% of the logging that goes on here is illegal. Official certificates show when and where trees can be felled, but no one is running any checks.
There are people who will sell huge trees for the equivalent of a sack of rice. They'll sell it for the equivalent of $20, when some of these cedar trees would be on the market in Europe would be worth at least $4,000 just one tree. So there's long-term and grand-style robbery going on here.
The days of these giants of the Amazon basin rainforest may well be numbered. Our journey continues to the subtropics, over the border to Ecuador, to Hacienda Limón in the province of Cotopaxi. This hacienda grows cocoa. The fruit turns yellow when it's ripe. The bean type known as Nacional only grows in Ecuador, and it's known for its excellent aroma. It's important for the quality of the chocolate that the beans are not damaged when the pods are opened, and that only the fully ripe ones are harvested.
To find out how ripe they are, you knock on it like this. You can feel that the beans are soft, and when they're soft, they're ripe. Here at our hacienda, we harvest every 14 days so we can hit the best possible moments. Others only harvest once a month, but then their cocoa pods are even greener than these. They're overripe and they have started to sprout.
The pods are weighed in the morning. A labourer earns $15 a day for harvesting 80 kilos of fruit. Samuel von Rutter has developed his own technique for improving the aroma of the cocoa. He dries the fruit in the open for 1 day before it is fermented. The brown colour of the bean shows that the cocoa is ready. In the past, chocolate was mostly a blend, a mixture of cocoa types from different countries.
The trend of making a chocolate with cocoa from Ecuador, Madagascar, or Ghana has emerged over the last few years. That was something quite new. What we want to do next is make chocolate that's not just from a particular country, but from a hacienda, using cocoa from a particular hacienda. There are connoisseurs who say our chocolate from Ecuador is one of the finest, and of course that's interesting and encouraging for us. It lets us know that we're doing something right.
There's only one way to find out if the cocoa really is as good as they say, and that's to taste it.
Ese es el licor que mandamos. Y eso con el proceso, el conchado, se va a desaparecer, no es problema.
At 2,850 meters, Ecuador's capital, Quito, is the world's highest legal capital city. It's home to about 1.5 million people. The Basilica del Voto Nacional, with its animal gargoyles. And the Plaza de la Independencia with the cathedral, the old heart of the city, is a World Heritage Site. The Teatro Bolivar is the most important theatre in the country. Built in 1933, it burned down in 1999. Pizza Hut had a restaurant on the ground floor, the oven caught fire and the whole building was damaged. Pizza Hut has never paid compensation. The theatre reopened its doors for business not long after, but the damage can still be seen. The roof was intended to be temporary. It can get bitterly cold during evening performances, and noise from the streets is audible inside. The German embassy is donating funds to rebuild this theatre that means so much to people.
It's amazing to see after months, after years of the fire, that there are still people standing in front of this building, and they are crying and they are feeling that their theater is burned and they want this theater back as it was before, as a glorious and the most fantastic theater in this city.
Hundreds of artists have performed here since the fire. Bernardo Mantilla has arranged for this street theatre company, who call themselves El Trapecio, to get some professional training at the Teatro Bolivar and perform there regularly.
It's wonderful to have such a beautiful place to work and put into practice everything you've learned. It's very different to performing in the street, where you're really close to the people. You're also close to the audience here, but the fact that the stage puts you up higher than the people gives you a particular presence, and that's something you have to appreciate and maintain.
The Galapagos Islands lie nearly 1,000 kilometers west of the mainland in the Pacific Ocean. This was where Darwin found the inspiration for his theory of evolution. There are 15 larger islands and hundreds of small ones. 97% of the area is protected as a nature reserve. The islands are volcanic, as this crater on the island of Santa Cruz shows. Galapagos means tortoises in Spanish, among the island's most striking inhabitants. They can live up to 150 years, weigh up to 250 kilograms, and they can mesmerize tourists. On the Isle of Santa Cruz is the Darwin Research Station. It runs a breeding program for the giant tortoises. Sailors used to take them on board their ships as food and almost drove the species to extinction. Without the research station, many of the huge reptiles would have died long ago. They are taken care of here for their first 3 to 4 years until they are old enough to survive in the wild.
It takes 120 days for the eggs to hatch, and then we put them in these corrals you see back here for 2 years, protected from the rats, and then we put them outside of the corrals in a semi-natural area for 2 more years. And after that, we send them back to the island where they belong to.
It's an hour's walk to Tortuga Bay. Environmental protection is paramount here. Everyone entering the area has to sign a logbook, so in the evenings wardens can check to make sure all visitors have left the beach. Although the name might suggest an abundance of turtles, you're more likely to encounter an iguana here. These animals spit salt water through their noses as a rather unappetizing means of defense. The islands used to be known as the Islas Encantadas, or Enchanted Islands, because no one could believe the sheer variety of species so far from the mainland. Some areas are off limits to visitors not in the company of a special Galapagos guide. The curious thing about the Galapagos Islands is that the animals are not afraid of humans, and no one knows why. The island's culinary specialty is fish. There are strict fishing quotas in place here. In the Galapagos, nature conservation and personal need have to be very carefully balanced. Fish for restaurants and communities in the surrounding area is sold at the fish market in Puerto Ayora. Our journey continues back to the mainland. Ecuador is the Spanish word for the equator. The search for the waistline of the world leads to a place called Mitad del Mundo, with its eponymous monument claiming to mark the exact middle of the world, the equator. Or maybe it no longer does.
Nowadays we know that we have a little mistake, and it's because we are about 200 meters in the south of the real line. But we know it nowadays because of the GPS.
A few kilometers farther on, in a place called Cayacaji, there's a smaller version of the same monument. And it's also 200 meters off. So where is the 0-degree latitude line then? A sign on the side of the road points to the museum Intinan Camino del Sol. Hundreds of years ago, the native people already knew that the 0-degree line is under the path of the sun on the equinox. And there it is.
The sun sets vertically on March 21st, and we also have the sun fire on this spot. But today we've got GPS, and we see the latitude line 000. Our native ancestors were already well aware of this location.
In the next part of our series, our journey continues to Colombia.